Welcome to the Design Thinker podcast, where we explore the theory and practice of design. Hosted by me, Dani, and
me, Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, Dani. How are you today?
I am good. How about you?
I'm very well, thanks. Yes, I'm looking forward to our podcast today.
Yeah, we have a guest with us today.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about privacy law and what design thinking has to do with privacy law. And to help us with that conversation, we have a guest with us. Rali, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Dani and Peter. Good morning. My name is Rali, and I'm very passionate about privacy and customer and how to make things easier for customers to navigate this ever-changing and complex world. I have a lot of experience in marketing, loyalty, data, and insights across retail, banking, and FMCG industries. And at the moment, I help work with teams and help organizations just make things simpler. I embed privacy in customer experience. And often I talked about, as you say, business and customer perspective in area where usually compliance and legal perspectives dominates the field. So I'm super excited to be here and talking about customer and privacy.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And this sort of topic is right up our street. Our listener knows that we like to get into subjects that on the surface seem really different, but actually if you scratch the surface, you can see that they're really joined and aligned. Yeah, we're definitely really interested in how to make things easier for customers, full stop. So yeah, looking forward to our conversation.
Echo all of that. So maybe we can start, Raleigh, with just, we usually like to start with kind of defining things. Peter and I are kind of nerdy that way. So maybe we start with defining, what do we mean by privacy?
It's a very, very big question. And there are many, many definitions. From my point of view, every individual have the rights to define how they want to be seen in the world. For some people, they will post their lives on Facebook and TikTok. They will be sharing pictures of their families and stories. For others, this is probably a step too far, and they will stick to emails and not sharing personal information online. So personal information is no longer about date of birth and name and address. It's a lot more into that because digitally, so many data points are created, and you can use literally 3 or 4 data points to identify the individual. So yeah, it comes back to who you are, what your values are, and how you want to be seen in the world.
So does that mean the traditional definition of privacy was things like making sure we keep like our name and address and date of birth safe? But it sounds like what you're saying is now it's also things like our photos or images of ourselves.
Yeah, so you definitely need to keep your passport details and date of birth and address safe, but there's a lot more into it, and it comes to, from what I'm hearing from customers, is that it's about personal choice. Some customers will be a lot more digitally savvy and they will understand how data moves and what happens in the digital space. Some of them will clear their cookies on a regular basis, for example, or use software so they are not tracked across the web. Others will change their settings in Facebook. But again, from what I'm hearing is relatively small number of customers do that. Most customers are really confused. They don't know how things work. They don't know how their data are used. And what really concerns me a lot is that they don't know what value they get back when organizations use their data. So I often, when I talk about customer experience, I talk about, imagine like privacy is a maze, and it's a maze, very, very complex. And the customer experience teams have the craft, the art, the power to put the signpost in this maze to help customers to navigate. the maize and also get value so they can live more meaningful life, more fulfilled lives.
I love that visual explanation of a maze. All of these accounts and things we set up, there's all of these settings, and honestly, half the time I look at them and I don't even know what they mean and then there's, the settings, and then there's the options, but it's never really clear what, if I move it from this option to this option, what does it actually do? So I love that description of it being a maze and then having signposts.
Yeah, and it being in the power of the CX team or the organization to actually put signposts in place. As you were talking there, I definitely think the opposite of that is true at the moment. In other words, there's been deliberate hiding of signposts or elimination of signposts. A couple of, maybe just to dwell on some definitions. When you're saying customers here, this is customers of any customer in any situation. Is that where this applies and where you're looking at?
Yes. So when I talk customers in any situation.
Yeah.
Privacy law will apply to individuals and any organization. And again, the intent is to promote and protect individual privacy. I'm talking about customers, individuals who interact with services and products.
So those services can be services that are provided by like commercial organizations or government agencies. So across the board, privacy law would apply.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. Also, customers will be people who read media, people who interact with social media platforms, people who go to the supermarket and buy bread and butter and snacks for their kids.
Be another kind of defining, drawing the box that we're playing in and talking about. So the three of us are in, or I think the three of us are in New Zealand. I know I'm in New Zealand at the moment, and I imagine that our privacy laws are similar to, but slightly different to some countries, and maybe very different to other countries. So your point of view, your perspective to help customers is about more than just people in New Zealand.
Absolutely. So you're right. Legislation varies a lot between different countries. GDPR is still probably the strictest legislation. However, there's a wave of change across the world. US is catching up. Australia is changing their privacy laws as well. New Zealand is slightly different. In New Zealand, our legislation is principle-based. There's some argue that we are behind the world. So our legislation is much lighter. The fines for breaches are, let's say, $10,000. In globally, there will be millions of dollars. So we still in New Zealand take the approach, yeah, she'll be all right. And we believe that people will do the right thing. But we have a lot of work to do to catch up on legislation, technology, and customer experience to make sure that we actually manage this space is managed in a lot more appropriate way.
As you were speaking there, was a bit of a facepalm moment, but because of course we are in New Zealand, but even right now we're using technology that is based somewhere else in the world. This, Zoom technology belongs to, I don't even know where Zoom is domiciled and what regulations apply to that. So, once we're involved in any digital experience, then we're essentially global citizens, and we could be at the whim of regulations in, who knows where. So I guess that maybe this is bringing back to your perspective, which is helping customers be aware of the maze they're in and helping them navigate it.
I love this. I talk a lot about the concept local customers, global community, because I live in my local community in New Zealand, in Auckland. I have my friends, but I'm part of a much bigger global community because I interact with so many people around the world via the digital technology, and my individual footprint is no longer Rali living in New Zealand, is the global footprints that literally touches millions of people across the world. And yeah, many customers don't realize that. And yes, there are privacy implications if your business promotes services to products overseas, or overseas products are promoted in New Zealand as well. And organizations need to understand that from legislation point of view, governance, compliance. And I keep coming back to customer. How do we make things easier for the customers? So we respect customer choices. we provide good services and help them navigate the maze.
So we talked a lot about privacy law, and I think there's also a lot of confusion around what is the intent of privacy law. And I say that because I think you've got that view of people feeling like privacy law means we can't share any information about anybody with anyone else, right? What's actually the intent of privacy law? What's it intended to do?
So the intent is to, very broadly, is to promote and protect individual privacy. However, the devil is in the detail. And again, I'm going to talk probably in New Zealand and touch base some of the GDPR. So in New Zealand, by law, consent is not mandatory when you collect data. You need to inform customers what you do, but you don't need to ask for consent. But when it comes to communication, in direct marketing communication, the guides and the legislation in New Zealand says you have to ask for consent. So I recently asked one of the experts, what do we do? Do we ask for consent or not? And this is where it's really important that there's a solid legal view what the legislation means, how it is interpreted. So I always say, start with your compliance is your baseline. That's the minimum you need to do. You need to do the right thing. However, I don't believe organizations actually can allow themselves to stay in this level anymore, because privacy is about building trust with customers. It's not just about meeting the legal obligations. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples and why we need to be moving beyond compliance. So, ethical dilemmas. There are a lot of cases where can we collect this data or do something with the data? Yes, we can, because it's legal and technology allows us. But is it ethical to do that? Example is I have different sources of information. I have collected them, but I decided that I'm going to link them so I create a completely different view of the customer. Well, is that the right thing to do if we haven't actually asked customers and customers don't understand what's going to happen with the data? AI, I'm asked a lot. Shall we tell in our privacy policy that we're collecting data and we're training AI? And I'm like, yeah, of course you should. Have you asked customers if they're happy to, for their data to be used? So legislation and ethical questions, they overlap in some cases, but given the speed of technology, the change in technology, there are big ethical questions that we have to face and we have to resolve. And also there's a competitive advantage. I do strongly believe that embedding privacy in customer experience and moving beyond compliance will give you competitive advantages. And Apple, for example, is taking the lead on a lot of this, how they use privacy as a competitive advantage. There has been advertising as well by Apple showing how data are used. And I have seen, as I said, other use cases around the world as well.
Two things about what you've said. One is there's legality and then there's ethics. And something can be legal but still be unethical. And just because something is legal doesn't make it ethical. When it comes to data, that's a thing that that's a tension that we're always going to have to balance and navigate.
Yeah, just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do something. Something I picked up on there about Apple using privacy as a competitive advantage, and what we're saying, what you're saying, what we're seeing is, for me, it comes all the way back to the definition you gave us at the beginning there, Rali, which is every individual has the right to decide how they're going to be seen. And let's go back 20 or 30 years ago, that would have been relatively straightforward for everyone to kind of pick up and understand. It was like your date of birth and your name. But now things have changed and are changing right now kind of exponentially. And there's lots of noise, whether it's about data or AI. And I think for me, this is this principle, if you like, this kind of founding principle is the anchor that we can come back to as designers and people who want to help other people understand the maze and navigate through the maze. And there's something about the Apple situation where they're realizing that, I guess it's an edge. I'd be interested in hearing what your thoughts are on it. But it's like, how might we educate all of us around the value of the information we are willingly but unwittingly given away over the last 10 or 15 years, any of us on social media. And it reminds me of a documentary that came out, it must have been 10 or maybe longer, about Google, or about internet terms and conditions. the
Yes.
terms and conditions that everybody just ticks, saying yes, I accept, because to read it would take 3 years. The documentary illustrated, just be aware that these are the things you're signing up to. You're basically giving away your privacy. What are your thoughts on that?
Apple has made a stand and saying this is a competitive advantage, and now we help customers navigate this space and give them choice. A lot of organizations say choice and control from designing point of view needs to be at the center when we're helping customers manage privacy. I do agree with that, but probably I have another thought as well. Giving too much choice to customer too often with things that are extremely helpful probably confuses customers a lot more. And this is where it needs to be, organizations needs to have really strong values when it comes to data and privacy and strong governance, and saying, how you have the best security, how we know how my data is used, how we ask the question, should we collect? And then telling customers in a very simple language, my promise to you is that I will keep your data secure and I will give you value back and I will help you, in the journey. And then giving customers meaningful choices during the journey. And this is really important. We agree on terms and conditions, 10 years ago when you sign up for this email. How often have you been asked about your preferences and how they have changed? I mean, your life has changed, but we're never asked if our data preferences have changed and the way we receive communication should change. So embedding these nudges within the journey and saying, if you tell me you like these colors, I will be able to show you clothes or furniture in your favorite colors. So explaining the why when customers share more data within the journey. In this way is much easier, it's relevant, very simple, and customers almost visually can understand the value immediately. And again, they few really good examples from IKEA and few others across the world where they actually can demonstrate how within the app journey, online journey, you can show the value back to customers. Unfortunately, I think this is an area that is not developed. It's not a lot of focus because it's complex and because it requires, a lot of effort to build all of these nudges through the journey and show the value.
There is such a thing as like choice overload. When you have so many choices, the more choices you have, the harder it is for you to choose. So I think when you're given a lot of choices about something you don't understand, we tend to make less choices because it's just that much harder, right? Even if it was you think about I can never decide what I want to have for dinner. And that's a really simple choice. And it's a topic I know a lot about. And then you take that to privacy law. It's just that much more complicated. How do you use our design thinker toolbox to make this simpler so that people understand the key points that they need to make a choice? And then those choices are presented in a way that is easy, simple to understand.
For me, what's emerging, I think, is the problem to the kind of the design challenge, if you like, to overall to solve is maybe less, or it is about privacy. But I just thought perhaps it's more about trust because, as we just said here, there's so much. Coming back to the maze analogy, trust. If I'm the organization, then I need to earn and maintain the trust of Dani and Rali to lead you through that maze. And have you be able to trust me that I am doing the right thing on your behalf when it comes to privacy? Because he's finding the balance between too much, giving, like we said, giving customers too much information and giving them too many choices too often, and then at the other end of the scale is not giving customers any choice or any time.
Yeah, look, you guys are spot on. I often start with having the courage to ask a question. When it comes to designing a new product or a journey. You will have stakeholders that we always want everything and all that in the world. But having the courage and asking, why are we doing that? Is there a better way to do it? And can we actually use a simple language to show customers how this works? It's if I can explain to my mom why I'm asking for this information, what she's going to get back, that is a good start. The privacy policies, Peter, you reference is a very good example. I still find it's very common in New Zealand is a legal agreement I'm reading, and it's pages long. And most customers don't have legal degrees. They don't understand this. And there are organizations that are hiding behind the privacy policies so they can use that for a lot more benefits on organizations than actually doing the right thing. It's like hide and seek. I keep telling organizations, don't play hide and seek games. It's not a good place to be transparent. Courage to ask the right question. Challenge yourself to use simple language like talking to mom or grandma. Really important. And let's figure out how to simplify privacy policies. I have seen great examples of using videos, infographics, even games for children. This is a great example from overseas where children have to understand what's happening, when they play games, and they used actually a game to show what information to create and collect and how it is used. So massive opportunity for customer experience teams to get this legal complex jargon that the legislations have created and make it accessible, transparent, simple, and just for humans, for real people.
The other thing that you mentioned earlier that I really want to come back to, privacy legislation. Yeah, it is a legal obligation, but I've always believed it's also the way that we show customers we care about them. The legal obligation that's just table stakes. As a customer, I expect you to do things that are legal. I expect you to be abiding by the legalities. But then I also have this other expectation that you're going to take care of me. Like I'm giving you money for services. I'm giving you my information for services. And in return, I expect to be looked after. So this is where that competitive advantage comes in, because we can actually use regulations to show customers that we are looking out for them. We are doing the right thing by them. And then the regulation is actually the measure that helps, or the metric that helps us show that.
Yeah, you're spot on. Governments already said that you can't hide behind terms and conditions and privacy policies if something goes wrong. So lawyers will be looking a lot more at the details. They say, well, yes, it's in the terms and conditions, but it's not an accessible language. So the customers didn't understand that. Hence, this resulted in data breach or something else, sharing information. And they used to say a lot of spotlight on how do we make this, especially privacy policies, a lot more accessible to customers. And again, comes back values of the organization, having the courage to ask the question and these questions are welcome. Getting CX involved in governance forums when it comes to that, so you bring diversity of thinking and just simply debating the ethical implications from different angles. So all of that will build stronger culture where there's a lot more transparency, and all of this will result in better customer experience and more value in building trust.
That's another thing you hit on, because I've been at plenty of tables where regulations are being discussed, and oftentimes it feels like I'm the lonely voice that's going, well, what about the customer? What about the customer? What about the customer? And it almost seems like that's not a space, that there isn't a space created when things are being discussed about how we're implementing regulation, and that really brings the customer into that conversation.
Privacy is a leadership decision to do the right thing. So it needs to start from the top. The exec teams and senior leaders need to create the space for people to be able to ask these questions. And it's literally having the courage to ask the first question. And starting this conversation probably is the hardest. And also, I spent a lot of time talking to lawyers, and I would love to spend time with lawyers and coach them how to ask different questions in a customer language, understand customer behavior. So we facilitate this really good discussion between the different teams, but the centers around the customers, not one team looking after legislation, the other one customer journeys, and there's not actually any debate or discussion within the organization.
You're talking our language now, Rali. Those are my favorite parts of a design project, where we get the cross-functional team together, often with not just different points of view, but completely different and opposite points of view, and centering the conversation not around one of those points of view and debating it, but actually putting the customer or, the employee, the person we're trying to help, putting them in the middle of things, and then having everyone start to align their perspective and realize that that's the important thing, not their individual. So yeah, that's definitely a human-centered approach from my point of view. Leadership needs to start, and I imagine that leaders in organizations, this is a change for them. They've become successful leading organizations in one environment that has worked up until now, but now, as we're saying, they need to shift their organization to carve out a new competitive advantage around trust. I imagine that's quite difficult for people.
It is, yeah.
What sort of things have you seen working to help them start to see the potential and what they might need to do differently?
It starts with the decision that we want to make a difference in this space. And again, it's a leadership decision to privacy, to do the right thing. What worked really well is that when it comes to governance, the governance forums includes representatives from different teams, marketing or CX, legal, technology. I have seen cases where actually the leaders leading the governance are not from the technology or the legal team. It's actually customer-facing functions like marketing or chief marketing officer, chief customer officer as well, which just because you have senior leaders working in the customer function leading data and privacy governance changes the conversation completely. Absolutely changes conversation completely. The other things that works is that I led a workshop a few years ago, again, representative of different teams, and I was really pondering how do I bring the team together given the different expertise and expectations in the room. And I ended up saying that I need to get into bringing fun into the room. So I found videos of how data are used for different things. I got customer stories. I got market research. I recorded videos with like team members, but the real human stories bringing it in the room. And once we started talking about this, you could just see how the tone changes in the room. And instead of talking about, what's the technology roadmap or what's the next legislation coming, I said, oh my God, really, this is happening. I did also had to present on the exec team about the roadmap. And I'm like, well, here's a pre-read, but it's quite long and complex. And in the end, I said, you know what? If you have time to read pre-read, amazing. If not, just watch this video. And I sent them one video how actually IKEA is showing how privacy is embedded in the customer journey and showing how that is collected by the journey and explaining the value back. And I walked in the room with the exec, and one of the senior execs working in operations says, I get it now. You have been talking about this for 2 years. I get it. How can I help? And I'm like, I watched the video. And I'm like, fantastic. So how, and coming back to why I started, this space, we focus on very long documents and legislation and technology and complexity, but there is a different way for us to look things differently. One more thing. So when it comes to training, usually the legal team, we do the training and shows what the principles, legislation, where we are. Here's the policy, read it. It's 120 pages, all of that. How about we change that and actually CX experts do privacy training or marketing experts do privacy training and make it really relevant for the team. Yes, we cover legislation. That's what I do in the training I run. Yes, we cover legislation, but we talk about registration journey. We talk about preference and make it really, really relevant for the team. For many brands, the first moment of truth when customer interacts with the brand is the registration page and the consent button. So how can you use this as an opportunity to build trust and excite customers and tell them the value you're going to give them back? So this trusted relationship starts from literally the first moment, instead of trying to follow customers across the network and use different medias.
Something that's been playing in my mind is that this kind of maybe a reminder or realization. The mental picture I've got is when I go into even a retail store, let's say a furniture store, and I buy something, I hand over my card and I give the store some money, and I get, let's say, I'll get an armchair, and that'll end up in my house. I've carried out a transaction. It's an exchange of value. I've given them money. They've given me an armchair. I think hopefully more and more people are realizing that at the same time as doing that, I'm also, even on that simple transaction, giving the organization, that company, some of my own personal data, some information about me. And at the moment, it's an imbalanced transaction because I don't get any value from that. And what you're saying is part of this, part of the privacy maze is being aware that we're in a maze, but also I think having consumers, customers, users, etc., start to realize that there is an imbalanced exchange of value, especially online, especially in digital environments where we're giving away so much of our own information, kind of unknowingly, unwittingly. But we're not getting anything in exchange for that. That kind of brings me back to I just need to ask you something you mentioned almost at the beginning, Rali, which is a lot of the time I'm kind of a little bit naive and laissez-faire about, up to a point, about digital information. It just is what it is. We're living in the 21st century. Our information is out there. And part of my brain imagine is that, well, it's just in a massive big pool of data, so they can't possibly find who I am or information about me. But you mentioned that they'll need 3 or 4 points of data to identify individuals. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I have read the different studies, and the latest I heard was that you need 4 different data points and you can identify a customer or individual. And generally, the studies I have read is like it goes between 3 to 4 and, probably 6, 7 different data points, and you can identify individual. And this is a well-documented fact. That's why privacy information is no longer perceived to be only your name and date of birth. It's actually any information that you can identify a person. It could be religious beliefs, it could be political preferences, etc. So all of these data points can be used to identify individual. So when organizations collect data, really the why needs to be debated. Why do we need it? Also, how the information will be used in a safe way, so we don't actually do harm, even in intended. You don't do harm in our organization. And also not debating the why I'm collecting it, but debating if I have the right data models to get the value. I'll give you an example. Carbon footprint. I decided to register for a service there when I will be given prompts how to improve my carbon footprint, and I had to ask a lot of questions. And naturally I'll ask, do I drive a car? Do I take a train? How long I travel? Number of households, etc., which was okay. I mean, makes sense, yeah? But then I was asked, what's my household income? And I'm like, I don't really trust this organization. And why should I tell them what's my household income? And then based on my experience in market research, I know that customers very often, they don't share their real income. They will usually share a lower income. And I'm like, well, then it's not accurate, the information you're going to give me back. And then I literally Googled and say using income to predict carbon footprint. And yes, I found study that use income data, but they found quite a few studies that says that you don't need income data to predict that. And then I'm like, okay, so I get it, but why do you need my income data to give me value back? Sure, thinking has evolved and you don't need to collect this data anymore. So coming back to the why, how information will be used, and do you have actually the right data models to give the value back to customers?
Just bringing back to this, sorry, Dani, the maze and the signs. An alternative, that organization could create a better customer experience. Did you sign up with them, or did you resist?
No, I
Did you
didn't.
stop?
In the end, I just
Okay.
decided that I don't trust the organization with my
So
data, and it's data that is not necessary for them to collect, and I decided not to sign up.
they lost your the opportunity to have you as a customer. Alternatively, they could have, maybe, if they had explained why they were collecting that income data, you might have continued. But the fact that they put that burden of investigating that question to you, then they lost you. They anti-nudged you, if that's a phrase.
Yeah, the trust. That's the trust in the way I want to be seen in the world.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
When I do research for organizations, they usually have like, oh, we should ask these, 97 questions. But for me as a researcher, doing research ethically is something that not only an obligation, but it is just something that I just do. If for every question that we ask a customer, we have to be able to demonstrate why we're asking it. Like, why do we need to ask this? And because we've asked this, we're going to then do XYZ with it. So I think it's not just understanding why it's being collected, but it's also understanding the outcome that's coming out of being that, having that information. And you have to do that for every single question that you're asking. And if you cannot if you cannot explain why, and then the outcome of that why, then you don't need to be collecting it. But oftentimes it's such a fight to go, no, we're not. I don't care that you've asked that for 100 years, but you don't have to ask it anymore.
It is. It's a valid point, Dani. That's my experience as well. We want to know everything for everybody because we believe it's important. And again, referencing a study I've looked at recently, there's a study that 60% of the data organizations collect is not used. And that's a massive number. And that's my experience as well. Most of the data collected by organization is not used. We keep it just in case, but just in case is not a time frame. It's not in legislation. It's not in any best practice, guys. And just in case is not a time frame. So that's again comes back to the values of the organization, the principles the organization wants to follow, and the culture they build so people can have the courage to ask questions. And drive change.
Throughout this conversation, you've mentioned, having the courage to ask the question. There's always like a couple of questions that get everything going, everything moving. So I wonder if you could give us some examples of questions that for a leader in an organization or just anybody in an organization that really wants to get a conversation going around this and they built up the courage. What are some of those questions they can get started with?
Should we, especially when we have a senior stakeholder saying, I want to do that. And we said, can we collect that? Yes. And say, should we do that? And I would say, take the first step. It's really scary when, you engage with senior stakeholders and you need to be asking these challenging questions. Start with the first step. Senior leaders are getting a lot more involved in the data and the privacy, and I would like to believe they understand it's a big ethical debate that needs to be had. So should we is a very, very good question. Then probably not a question, Dani, but I would say an advice I would like to give. If you work in CX, call your legal team and have a coffee with them and just talk. Don't try to understand legislation and say, how can I help? What is going on? And if you are in the legal team or the compliance team or the privacy team, reach out to the marketing guys and the CX guys and have a coffee with them and just how it is going. I just want to understand more. Probably this is the two most important things for me that have made a difference. I had to build up my courage. And I had every week, I say, I will reach out to three people and ask questions and I will try to meet them for coffee. And this is how I met you, Dani and Peter. And I'm continuing that. And it gets easier. And you will meet amazing people. And I promise you, you will get more confidence and you will identify opportunities to add value to customers and build your expertise in this space.
Nice.
Call me. I'm always up for a coffee.
Thanks, Rali. I love peak end theory, Dani, and that feels like a nice high to wrap up on.
Yes, that was definitely a peak and real moment.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you so much, Rali, for making the time to come chat with us. This has been so insightful, and I think a view of CX and design thinking that isn't talked about very often. So we appreciate you making the time for us.
Thank you, Rali.
Thank you very much, Dani and Peter. I love discussing this with you, and I really hope that you find it helpful. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. That is it for us in this episode. Bye, Peter.
Bye, Dani.
Bye, Rali.
Bye, Rali.
Bye-bye.